Harry Potter didn't just do well for Universal, it saved the company's theme park business. In the quarter after Hogsmeade opened in 2010, attendance across the Orlando resort jumped 36%, and revenue climbed 62% to $364 million, the best quarterly result in the resort's history up to that point. Those profits were a big part of how Comcast eventually bought out its partner Blackstone and took full ownership of Universal Orlando. Nearly every land, hotel, and park that came afterward was built on the back of a boy wizard. So it makes sense that Universal kept going back to the well, again and again, until Harry Potter stopped being one attraction and became the backbone of the entire resort. The problem is what all that expansion did to the thing fans fell in love with in the first place.
To understand what changed, you have to go back to what the original actually was.
The Wizarding World of Harry Potter opened at Islands of Adventure on June 18, 2010, built over the old Lost Continent area, at a cost of around $265 million. It was one land, 20 acres, tucked into the back of a single park, with one village, one castle, and a pair of attractions. The centerpiece was Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, a dark ride built inside a full recreation of Hogwarts, using a robotic arm system that had never been done at that scale before. The queue alone took you through the greenhouse, past the talking portraits, through Dumbledore's office, and the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. And plenty of people would tell you the line was better than half the rides in the park. Outside, Hogsmeade Village sold butterbeer that most guests had only ever read about, and a wand from Ollivander's ran you about $35. On opening day, the wait to get in stretched around all of Islands of Adventure, out through the front gates, and around the City Walk Lagoon. Some people stood in that line for over 8 hours. And when they finally got in, what they walked into felt like a place that shouldn't have been possible to build. The theming was incredible, and that mattered. The bigger reason it worked, though, was that there was exactly one of it in the world. If you wanted to walk down that street, you had to come to Orlando, buy a ticket to this specific park, and see this specific land. There wasn't a version in the next park over. There wasn't a second castle. The whole thing fit into an afternoon, and because there wasn't much of it, every corner felt loaded with meaning. You noticed the frost on the Hogsmeade rooftops. You watched the frog choir because there was nothing pulling you somewhere else. Butterbeer felt like an event, and Universal sold 1 million mugs of it in the first 6 months alone. Rarity was doing a lot of the heavy lifting that most guests never really thought about. The land was special in large part because you couldn't get it anywhere else, and Universal knew exactly how valuable that feeling was. It's worth remembering how much of the original land was built around small, unhurried moments. The Frog Choir performed a cappella out in the village. The Triwizard Spirit Rally brought students out to the crowd. Ollivanders ran a little ceremony inside, where the wand chose the wizard. None of these had lines that mattered much, and none of them were the reason you bought a ticket, but together they gave the land a texture and a pace. You could stand in one spot with a drink and just take it all in. As the franchise scaled up and the crowds multiplied, that unhurried pace got harder to find. The newer lands are built around massive headliner attractions that pull enormous queues, and the whole rhythm of a visit shifted toward getting in line, waiting, riding, and moving on to the next thing before the wait climbs any higher. And a feeling that valuable is very hard to leave alone. The numbers from that first year were staggering enough that expansion became a foregone conclusion. Islands of Adventure went from around 4.6 million visitors in 2009 to 7.6 million by 2011, a jump of roughly 2/3 in 2 years, off the back of a single land. So Universal did the logical thing and built a second one. Diagon Alley opened at Universal Studios Florida on July 8, 2014, taking over the space that used to hold the Jaws ride and the Amity section. It was arguably even more impressive than Hogsmeade, with a fire-breathing dragon perched on top of Gringotts Bank and a hidden entrance through a brick wall. Universal Studios Florida saw its attendance climb 17% that year, and another 16% the year after. 2 lands in 2 parks meant the story was now split in half, and Universal connected them with the Hogwarts Express, a real train ride between the two parks, with different scenes depending on which direction you traveled. It's a fantastic piece of theming. It also comes with a catch. To ride it, and to see both halves of the Wizarding World in one trip, you need a park-to-park ticket, which tends to run around $65 more than a standard ticket. The full story now cost extra. Diagon Alley also raised the bar in a way that mattered for everything that came after. Where Hogsmeade was a village you entered through an open gate, Diagon Alley was hidden entirely, reached through a gap in a London brick facade so that you couldn't even see it from the main walkway until you stepped through. Inside sat Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts, a 3D thrill ride built into a recreation of the Wizarding Bank, with a full animatronic dragon perched on the roof that breathes fire out over the street every few minutes. There was a hidden side street called Nocturne Alley, goblins behind the teller desks, and shop windows detailed down to the last prop. It was a spectacular piece of work, and it also set a new rule for Universal, whether they meant to or not. Every future Wizarding World had to top the last one. That's a fun problem to have as a fan, but it's an expensive and escalating one for a company, and it pushed every following land toward bigger budgets, bigger rides, and bigger crowds. Universal wasn't only building in Orlando either. The same land was replicated in Universal Studios Japan and Universal Studios Hollywood, and each opening did the same thing to attendance. Hollywood's park saw first quarter attendance jump 60% after its Wizarding World opened in 2016. The formula was proven, repeatable, and enormously profitable, so Universal ran it everywhere it could. Back in Orlando, though, the replication created a subtle problem. The Wizarding World was originally something you could experience completely in a single afternoon in a single park. By 2014, seeing the whole story meant visiting 2 parks and paying for the upgraded ticket to move between them. And by 2025, with the Ministry of Magic open at Epic Universe, experiencing all 3 lands required a multi-day ticket of at least 3 days, since that's the tier that includes Epic Access. The complete Wizarding World stopped being a thing you could just walk into. It became a multi-day, multi-park itinerary with its own logistics. From there, the build-out never really stopped. In 2017, Universal closed Dragon Challenge, the dueling coaster that had been sitting in Hogsmeade since the land opened, and replaced it in 2019 with Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, which quickly became the most in-demand ride in the entire park. More attractions meant more reasons to come, and more people coming meant more to sell them. The wand is a good example of how this evolved. What started as a $35 souvenir at Ollivander's turned into an interactive wand you could wave at hidden spell locations scattered around the village, priced at $65. Then came a second generation interactive wand at $85, sold right alongside the older ones. Butterbeer went through the same expansion. What was once a single frothy drink you could only get in Hogsmeade turned into cold, frozen, and hot versions, then butterbeer ice cream, butterbeer fudge, butterbeer potted cream, and an ice lolly, sold across multiple parks and even at a dedicated counter over in City Walk. None of this was accidental. Each edition made complete business sense, and each one shaved a little bit off the novelty that made the original feel rare in the first place. Then came the biggest swing of all. On May 22, 2025, Universal opened Epic Universe, its 4th Orlando theme park, and the single largest investment Comcast had ever made in its parks business, spread across a 750-acre development. One of its 5 worlds is a third version of the Wizarding World, called the Ministry of Magic, built around 1920s Wizarding Paris and the British Ministry from the films. The headline attraction, Harry Potter and the Battle at the Ministry, travels you by the Floo network from Paris into the British Ministry for the trial of Dolores Umbridge. And it is, by every account, one of the best rides Universal has ever built. It's also the single most popular ride in the park, to the point where the wait can hit 2 hours within minutes of opening, even during early access for hotel guests. If you want to skip that line, Universal's single-use express pass at Epic can run up to $362 per person. And the commercialization reached a new gear here too. The Ministry sells butterbeer creme brulee, butterbeer truffles, and butterbeer macarons, positioned as a more upscale, culinary take on the same butterscotch flavor people first tried in a plastic mug back in 2010. 3 parks, 3 Wizarding Worlds, and a franchise that now anchors the entire resort. Something else shifted as the footprint grew, and it had to do with what the Wizarding World even is anymore. The original Hogsmeade had a tight, specific sense of place. It was the snowy village next to Hogwarts, pulled straight from the core of the story everyone knew. Diagon Alley stretched that to Wizarding London, and the Ministry of Magic at Epic Universe stretches it much further, into 1920s Paris and the Fantastic Beasts films, sitting alongside a British ministry drawing from a completely different era of the story. Taken one at a time, each land is beautifully realized. Taken together, the Wizarding World has become a much broader and looser brand than the single, focused village that started it. It now spans different countries, different films, and different time periods, held together mostly by the word Wizarding on a sign. For a lot of casual fans, the thing they fell in love with was specifically Hogwarts and Hogsmeade, and that particular magic gets diluted as the brand keeps reaching into corners of the lore most guests have never read or seen. All of that expansion has a very specific effect once you're actually standing in the parks. Go back to the original Hogsmeade, and it's now one of the most crowded corners of Islands of Adventure. The village fills up by midday, and the shops get so packed that on a busy day, you often can't walk into them without waiting in a line just to browse. Filch's Emporium, one of the main stores, doubles as the exit for Forbidden Journey, so getting in means pushing against a constant stream of people leaving the ride. Universal has to sell wands from street carts and from shops near the park entrance because the actual stores inside the land are too jammed to handle everyone. The place that was designed around the feeling of wandering into somewhere hidden and detailed is now a place you shuffle through shoulder to shoulder, half your attention on a wait time app. The discovery that made the original special is hard to find when you're managing crowds the entire time, and that same pattern now repeats across all 3 lands. There's also a lot more to manage now than there used to be. In 2010, the interaction was simple. You walked into the land, you looked at things, you rode the ride, you drank a butterbeer. Today, getting the most out of a Wizarding World visit means juggling an interactive wand and its companion app to find spell locations, checking wait times on the Universal app, deciding whether a paid express pass is worth it, timing the Hogwarts Express around your park-to-park window, and at Epic, staking out the Ministry of Magic before the park even opens so you're not stuck in a 2-hour line. Each of these systems exists for a reasonable operational reason, and each one pulls your attention further away from the actual place you paid to stand in. The original land asked almost nothing of you except to look around. The current version asks you to run a small logistics operation to experience it properly. It's also worth looking at what a Wizarding World visit is actually made of now. The original land had 2 rides. Everything else was atmosphere and things to buy. A wand, a butterbeer, a chocolate frog, a house scarf from Dervish and Bangs. That retail was charming when it was a small part of a rare place. As the franchise expanded, the balance tilted further towards spending. A modern visit is built around an interactive wand you're encouraged to buy to unlock the spell locations, upcharged treats designed to be photographed, and shops that function as attractions in their own right. The buying became a bigger share of the experience than it used to be, and once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. A land that once felt like a place you explored increasingly feels like a place you're meant to shop your way through. The deeper issue is what this reliance does to Universal's incentives. Harry Potter is no longer one attraction the company can nurture. It's the backbone of a multi-park, multi-billion-dollar resort, which means the pressure is always to build more of it, not to protect what made it work. You can see the loop clearly at Epic Universe. The Ministry of Magic became such a guest flow problem so quickly that by November 2025, less than a year after the park opened, permits surfaced pointing to a possible expansion of the land to deal with the crowds. So the solution to a Harry Potter land being too crowded is more Harry Potter, which draws more people, which creates more crowding. Every version Universal adds pulls a little more attention, a little more spending, and a little more of the resort's identity onto one franchise. It's an incredible business, It's also the reason the original can never go back to being the small, singular thing it was, because there's simply too much money riding on it now to ever let it be small again. The reliance goes deeper than the parks themselves. Potter profits helped fund a wave of new Universal hotels, and the franchise became a central reason families booked longer stays. When Universal announced Epic Universe, part of the explicit goal was to turn Universal Orlando from a 2 or 3 day trip into a week-long destination that could compete with Disney World head-on for a family's entire vacation. Harry Potter is a huge part of what makes that math work. A guest can now spend 1 day in Hogsmeade, another in Diagon Alley, and another at the Ministry of Magic, and Universal has effectively used a single franchise to justify an extra few nights in its hotels and an extra few days on the ticket. That's brilliant business. It also means the company has every reason to keep the Potter footprint as large and as central as possible, because the entire week-long destination strategy leans on it. In terms of pure craft, the lands have only gotten better over time. Battle at the Ministry is more advanced than anything in the original Hogsmeade. The queues at Epic are so detailed that people walk through them without even riding, and the theming across all 3 lands is still the standard the rest of the industry measures itself against. If you've never seen any of it before, walking into any one of these lands for the first time is still one of the most impressive things you can do at a theme park. The rides are spectacular, the detail is obsessive, and Universal clearly still cares about getting it right. The thing that faded is harder to put on a spec sheet. It's the specialness that came from there being only one, from a world you had to travel to see, that you couldn't get a version of in the next park over, or a butterbeer flavor of at a counter in City Walk. And that's the strange tension running under one of the greatest success stories in theme park history. Universal built something so good that they had every reason to make more of it. And in making more of it, they wore down the exact quality that made the first one so powerful. The original Hogsmeade worked because it was rare, complete, and singular, a place that felt like a secret you had traveled a long way to find. 15 years later, fans have more Harry Potter than they could have dreamed of in 2010, across more parks, with more rides, more shops, and more butterbeer than anyone could get through in a single trip. By almost every measure that matters to a business, that's a triumph. But the feeling of walking into somewhere rare and unrepeatable, the exact thing that made people wait 8 hours on a June morning in 2010, gets a little thinner every time Universal decides the answer to loving Harry Potter is simply to build more of him. Anyway, that's my take on it. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching all the way to the end. It really does mean a lot. If you liked this one, there's another video up on the screen right now that I think you'd enjoy. And I'm slowly working my way toward 1,000 subscribers, which is the point where I actually start earning any ad revenue from these. So any bit of support toward that goes a really long way. Either way, I'm just glad you're here.